Guess what's back? Business and Brews, where real business talk meets real people and always fueled by a good brew. This time we're going podcast first, bite-sized, insightful, and built for conversations you'll want to share. I'm your host, Matt Pierce, founder and CEO of Immediate, and I'll be sitting down with leaders, entrepreneurs, and friends to talk about leadership, growth, and the stories that make business worth talking about. So grab your favorite brew, pull up a chair, and let's talk business the way it's meant to be talked about. Business and Brews, back, bolder, and better than ever. All right. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Business and Brews. I'm your host, Matt Pierce, and today we've got Del Smith, co-founder and CEO of Acclinate. Del, glad to have you here.
Matt, I'm excited to be here again with you.
Again, well, it's fun because if you guys have listened or watched Business and Brews years ago, I had Del on, and the way we used to do these we would do these 20, 30-minute interviews, and then we would chop them down to 5, 6, 8-minute sessions. And so we'd kind of pick and choose the highlights, and yours was so good out of the gate that we just used the first 8 minutes. And so I went back and watched that recently, and I told Kat on our marketing team, I said, hey, we've got a lot of extra content from Del. And she said, probably time to do another one and let everybody into the full 30-minute interview. So this is where we are today. And man, I'm excited to have this conversation and hear how things have changed and how the business has grown and all the learnings along the way. So this should be good.
Yeah, time goes by fast. That was about 5 years ago, Matt. 5 years. That's crazy.
That is crazy. Man, 5 years, which in the startup world feels like, 2 decades? Is that right? Let's get started with a refresher on Acclinate, why you started this business, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So Acclinate started in 2020. And so we are rounding the bases on a little bit over 6 years now. But we formed the company with this basis that our communities, particularly our underrepresented communities and our communities of color, are often left out of healthcare discussions and decisions. And so we wanted to create a company that both educated and empowered diverse communities to be able to take actions for better health. And then we wanted to be able to address a longstanding issue in the industry, which is inclusiveness of those individuals in healthcare. And specifically what we've been focusing on over the past 5+ years is around clinical trial diversity and inclusion. And that's at the basis of what the company does.
Very cool. Well, this is something I think from when you and I first met, it's resonated. And, my background before starting Immediate I spent 15 years in the healthcare technology world and worked in the EHR business, and a big part of what we saw and as we continue to move forward. I mean, the first steps, when I started there in 2005 was 4% of doctors were using electronic health records. So first is all right, we got to digitize this. And then as you start digitizing it and you start having all this data, you're like, how do we leverage this data to go create, go do clinical trials to help be proactive about health? There was a study, and this is dated. I'm sure it's, who knows, man, it could be even worse now. But I remember back in the day, one of the stats that we always used was something like 90% of healthcare expenses come in the last 1/3 of a person's life. And while I know that a lot of us, and we'll talk about this in a minute, a lot of us are being more proactive about our health. I wonder how that's shifted, and then very directly how we've been able to leverage clinical trials to enable people to be more aware of what their precursors are and what are things that they need to be aware of and be preparing for. Is that something that you guys have started to unlock and see as this, the way that you're working and the partnerships that you have, is that helping create a more proactive health system?
It is. It forms the basis of what the company is really about, Matt. We're not here as a mission to help pharma companies get more drugs on the market so they can make more money. Our primary objective and mission here is to educate, engage, empower people so they can make informed health decisions. And so there's a lot of what we do. I'd say probably 80% of what we do as a company is about that education, awareness, and engagement, meeting people where they are in the communities, both digitally and on the ground, to help them be able to get to a point where they're saying, all right, you know what, I have a better understanding of what's ailing me or my loved one or a family member, and I have an idea of what action I can take. And if one of those actions that they're interested in taking is a clinical trial as a treatment option, then we present that opportunity to them. And so, again, I'll say this, 80% of our work is around just educating and engaging that individual. But then to your point, that 20% of that work is then aligning them to be able to mobilize around a specific health action. And for our pharma clients, that's being able to present those clinical trials to them. So it works out really well. We benefit both our community as well as address a longstanding industry issue. So that double-sided marketplace is really what we're about.
That's so cool. And I mean, as you talk about that, it's maybe one of the reasons it's always resonated so well with me is because there's a lot of parallels to immediate, like, right, what we're doing with trying to enable and empower the frontline US workforce to kind of try to break the chains of paycheck to paycheck living and the bondage that comes with predatory title and payday loan services, right? And you're doing that from a health perspective, just empowering people, enabling them, which is it's such a noble and honorable thing to be doing.
Yeah, Matt, I appreciate that because I remember some conversations you and I had early on when we first met each other, and I was asking you about your business model, and what first came to mind was like, "Oh my gosh, you're doing these short-term transactional financial transactions. Is that really helping a person?" And you help educate me to say, "Listen, that's not the entire focus. The focus is on educating them so they can make better informed financial decisions, so they never have to use that service." And I know the same thing happens sometimes when people interact with us. They're like, "Wait, you're just trying to get us to be in clinical trials?" I'm like, "No, that's not the
Right.
objective. The objective is to empower you to make a health decision. And if you
100%.
so choose to use the clinical trial as a treatment option, we want to be able to facilitate that process." So a lot of parallels there, Matt. And so, my hat's off to you as well in your business. When we think about this world and the issues that so many of us face, we know they fall into one of those two categories, right? Health or economics and finance.
Yeah.
So we're addressing those two issues.
Awesome. Well, so that leads me to a question about scale. Obviously you're coming at this from a place of high integrity. You just explained it, right? Like, man, we're here to move the needle. And I'm going to ask you to share a personal story here in a minute that kind of ties back into this as well as to why you jumped into doing this. But before we get there, talk to me about when you come in and create a business and you do it with I'm doing this for all the right reasons. And then you start scaling, and now you get yourself into a position where you've got a team that you've built up, you've got partners, you've got investors. How do you make sure that you're locked in and that as you grow and scale this team that everybody's still aligned on the mission, that your investors understand, hey, this isn't just about making a buck, this is about like doing the right thing and helping improve health outcomes. Like, can you talk about how you've experienced and navigated that over the past 5 years?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm going to respond in a few different ways here. So let me start on a personal level because I believe with all of this, it begins with leadership. I have aspirations of being on a nice beach, sipping a nice drink at some point on the other side of this, saying "job well done," and directly having a bank account that signifies that we did well. But the last thing I want to do is be on that beach feeling like I didn't build something that was enduring, something that made an impact to people's lives, right? Because at the end of the day, when I'm gone, whatever's in the bank account won't really matter. It'll be the impact that was made. So I know it starts with the leader, and I don't think those things are separate. I think you can have both of them together, which is like, how do we do this in a fiscally smart way to where we can scale and grow and be self sufficient, but also how do we do this in a way that we are keeping the interest and the trust of the community first at hand, and celebrate the times when each individual makes a health decision that moves them closer to where they want to be at. So it starts there. But then it's your team, right? So then how do you operationalize that? And for us, for example, we have individuals specifically on our team who focus on ensuring that every decision that we make, we are not jeopardizing the well-being and the trust of our community. And those individuals have the ability to override me to say, yes, I hear you. This contract would be nice to the bank account, but what they want us to do is not in line with our mission, the way we operate. And so having those individuals and have enough of those individuals to where they're not afraid to express that when the time comes is important. So that's how we operationalize it. But let me tell you, it's not easy. At any given time, I've got one person, one entity on my shoulder over here saying, "Go get that bake," right?
Right.
And I got another entity on my shoulder like, "No, we need to focus on our communities and helping them get better individually around health." And the best days are when those two things align, and that's when that flywheel kicks in. And then sometimes the more challenging days is when there's seems to be a conflict between those two, but we work through them.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. Along those lines, you hit on it there at the end, like good days and bad days. And I know everybody's got good days and bad days. Everybody's got days where celebrate wins and days when you mourn losses. Can you talk a little bit as the leader of an organization? How do you kind of set the tone for taking the bumps in the road, celebrating the wins, but helping people understand that the losses are just short term setbacks? Or is there things that you do? Is that just do you lead by example there? Do you lead by, we have a loss, I step up in front of the company and talk about it? Like how do you handle some of those things? Because it's really easy to celebrate the wins, right?
Yes. Yes.
But as you know, and I know, and most people listening to this know, especially if you're an entrepreneur and you're listening to this, you know that you get told no a lot. You lose a lot of deals. You feel positioned to win a lot of things, and you get rug pulled in the ninth inning. Can you talk about like how you navigate some of those? I would say in two aspects. One, how you lead the organization through those, but then two, like what are there things that you've learned about yourself just from your career, and then particularly in the last 5 years, that's helped you kind of navigate those yourself, like in your own mind?
Yeah. I'm going to speak for the way that I lead, but I do believe it could be applicable for others, and that is being anchored. So having a center that I'm anchored to. Now, what that means in context of your question is we may have just signed our largest contract to date, and our team is thinking, "Yay, everything's fantastic. We're halfway to where we want to be at for our goal." And I'm saying, "Great job, team. We got to this point because of how we execute. Let's all raise a glass and celebrate. But tomorrow we got to get back to ensuring that we execute flawlessly so that this is not just the first large contract, but we have renewals and extensions that come from this, right?" And then on the other side of that pendulum, when they have the not so good days, which is, hey, that contract that we signed for 18 months, that pharma company's having issues with that study and they're killing it in month number 4. So, all this financial projection I just put out, I'm in my mind like, well, that's thrown out the water. I got to go back and redo that. But what I say to our team is, listen, team, we know that this is a turbulent time.
Hmm.
There are a lot of changes happening on the federal and regulatory level right now that's creating headwinds for us. This too shall pass. And you have to keep in mind, we built a company that has enduring strength and power to where this is not going to jeopardize the ongoing concern of the company. Yes, I know we all feel bad about this. I do as well too. Changes my projections, but we're not here for just one contract and just for one opportunity. We're here to build something that has a lasting impact. And so it's staying anchored and centered in that, right? Not saying I don't carry the way, but I'm not going to swing too far in either direction because people are watching. You get too excited, all right. And then it makes it more challenging to get through the tough times. And if you dwell on the bad times, then you don't have the motivation that people who are there and who are willing and committed to stay through that because you got to give them some level of optimism that things will get better.
Right. That's really good. I like that. It is. I think it's important to kind of have that even keel, but also I like what you said is still take the time to raise a glass. Like I feel like there's a lot of people who they take such a risk mitigation approach to things that they're like, we can't celebrate. We don't celebrate till the end. And I feel like that creates an environment where people feel like, all right, well, like what I'm doing day in and day out matters, but it's not worth celebrating. And so I think there's this balance of short-term celebrations versus also knowing, hey, when we lose some of these things, it's just part of the process. We're going to learn from it. We're going to get better. We lost a big deal 15 months ago and we sat down afterwards. I pulled the leadership team in. We did a post-mortem on it. We spent like 2 hours and we were like, what are the gaps? Are there technology things that we need to introduce to our roadmap to make sure that we've got this in the future? Was it a sales process issue? Was it what were the things that made us lose this deal? Because it was a long drawn out process, like a year long. The organization started with a bunch. They narrowed it down to two finalists. We were one of the finalists, and so 50-50 shot, right? And then we lose it. And then about 6 months ago, we won a big deal similar. And I'll tell you that I can't tell you how many times during that process I would say, remember what happened a year ago.
Yeah.
Let's make sure we do this. Let's make sure we do that. So it's kind of that post-mortem, you take the loss as an opportunity to learn and make sure that you're not going to repeat the same mistakes in the future.
Yeah. No, absolutely, Matt. It's a great example. And then you asked the question about, what have I learned over time that helps me kind of thinking about this and then navigating this space. And what comes to mind is that balance does not exist. So at any given day, I'm going home feeling like I probably am swinging the pendulum too far in this direction, and we raise the glass maybe too long and and celebrate it too much. And some days I'm like, ugh, I probably was kind of hard on the team, or I didn't spend enough time really talking about the issues that we need to address in order to improve and get better. And so I don't beat myself up as much about not being in balance because I know it's a balancing act, and I'm
Right.
looking at it over the long term, right? How did the week perform? How did the month perform? How did the quarter perform? How have I been performing this year? And then most importantly, it's just looking at myself in the mirror and saying, do I feel good about the decisions that I made, even if they were hard, even if I made them without complete information? Am I okay with the way I made a decision, the way I thought about it, the way I communicated it? And if I did, I don't beat myself up as much anymore as I used to.
That's so good. One thing I'd love to cover as you've scaled, your co founder, Tiffany, is a rock star. I've been a huge fan of hers for years as well. Going back 5 years ago when we first got to know each other, and you guys were kind of creating delineation in the organization of who does what and when and how. And as you've grown and scaled, are there things that you've struggled to let go, to pass off? If so, what was the process to get to a place? It's something that I've seen as a common theme with people like you and me who go, just, I want the ball, put the ball in my hands, right? Because I can handle it. And that's great for a short period of time. But you get to a certain point where you're like, all right, when there's like 8 of them coming your way and you're like, and people, you're creating an environment, people go, oh, I got to go to Matt or I got to go to Dell to get this done. Like, how do you process that, making a decision that I'm going to empower others, I'm going to engage them and help them grow? And how was that process for you as you've gone through it?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Tiffany, man. I want to call that out because I can't imagine doing this without a co-founder. And Tiffany and I are so different. Like our teams remind us of that probably on a weekly basis, right? And I think it's a fantastic yin and yang. Even when we have sometimes the conflicts and we don't see eye to eye, like we are committed and we're there because we recognize together we are so much better as a company, as a team, and co-founders. And what happens in that case is Tiffany has very distinct skill sets, and she's a genius in marketing, and she loves to get into the details and work with our teams on the most minute level on ensuring that we are executing flawlessly. Whereas me, I like to be strategic, and the details is something I'm not really interested in. And my genius is really around planning and modeling and financial modeling. And of course, that's where I thrive. So what I say is I'll go back to your example of having the ball because basketball, NBA playoffs is top of mind for me right now. You go from saying, I'm going to be the star player on the court, so give me the ball because I want to score, to saying, all right, it's probably better for me to be in a, excuse me, a coaching role. So now I want to move to, I'm the coach on the sideline that's observing and watching and ensuring that we get the best players and they're executing the way that we planned the game. What's happening for me is I'm like, I thought that's where it stopped. But it's like, oh wait, let's keep with that analogy. So now you're talking about moving from being a coach to general manager. And so right now I'm trying to find that exceptional leader slash coach and assistant coaches, trying to make sure that they have the resources to go out there and acquire the best players as well too, right? I'm keeping an idea, a bigger, broader picture of what's happening. And I think there's one other step that I am really interested is the next rung in that ladder, and that's like the true owner,
Hmm.
right? So the owner looks at it as like we're trying to build an endearing team and have an asset that has so much value that it is undeniable. And when you look at our ranking and how we rank against the entire field, we are some of the best or one of the best. And so that's that focus on positioning it as an asset, the company as an asset
Hmm.
versus running to play or having the ball to shoot is something that I've been going through. And I've actually really loved that process because you just see how there's so much more you can learn and do
Right.
being there. So I'd say I'm probably moving into that general manager role,
Yeah.
right? We keep with this, but ultimately, I'd like to think of this as being, the owner of the team that is really focused on ensuring that we maximize this asset that we have.
Man, that's so good. I haven't heard that analogy before. I've always thought of player to coach, but you're right. There's other rungs in the ladder, man. It's general manager, it's owner, it's getting to those places and then trusting that team that's on the floor to go put points on the board and keep growing. That's really good. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I mean, look, I can see it, and this is what happens with experience and time, and obviously pouring your heart and soul into something. But I can see it, like in the past 5 years, just like the changes that you've been going through in this, so far in this whatever 20 22 minutes. Like just the way that you're approaching things and the way that you're handling things, it's evident, and it's the reason that you guys are having so much success. That when you've got good leadership and you put the right people around you. I really like the point you made about you and Tiffany. Like I think that there's a lot to be said for having people. I talk about I talk a lot about as a founder, like you need to hire for your weakness, and that's not what you explicitly said, but it's what you implicitly said, right? It's like she does the things that that I'm not necessarily strong at, or that I don't necessarily want to do, and so as you do that, it allows you start getting some of these things off your plate that you don't need to be doing, which means you like grow stronger in the areas of the things that you do need to be doing, which is such a fun, free place to be when you're growing a business. So it's cool to see this.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Matt. It's a love growing and learning every single day. And 5 years after we had our first sit down, I just think about it. I'm like, wow, I've learned so much just in that 5 year time frame. I keep thinking at some point I'm gonna think about retirement here. And people are like, oh, you're not gonna retire, you're not gonna retire. And just recently, I've been thinking that like I kind of get it now. You accumulate so much knowledge in this process, right? The idea of just retiring and like, okay, all that knowledge just kind of goes by the wayside is not something you want to do. While I will not start another company, and I promise you that it's on record right now. I will not start another company after this. I'm very interested in finding ways to continue to pour into other leaders, the folks that ultimately will end up starting their own company as well too. Love to advise, love to work with them to help them be successful, to be able to pass on some of that knowledge that I've had. And hopefully I'm blessed to have another 5 years to be able to continue to grow and develop and get to a point where when I'm 55, because I am 50 now, that I can look back and say like, oh my gosh, I learned so much from when I was 50 years old. That's my hope.
Yeah. Well, if it's okay with you, if you don't mind getting personal, and if you don't want to do this, just tell me to shut up and we'll edit this part out. 5 years ago, we talked you barreling towards 50 and what that meant to you. Would you be comfortable for those of the listeners who haven't heard the first one? Would you be comfortable sharing kind of what that story is, and while we can take a minute to celebrate your 50th?
Yeah, absolutely. Storytelling about health is what we're all about. So I'm okay doing that. My biological father and every single male on his side of the family, without exception, passed away of cancer before the age of 50. And knowing that history, I thought that that was going to be my verdict as well too. It's hard, statistically to look at those numbers and say, well, I'm going to be different. And so a large part of my life has been around health and around trying to get my checkups, eating right, exercising, keeping myself in the best shape possible to overcome that. And I'm going to call it a curse, overcome that curse. And it's not just for me, Matt. I've got three sons and I've got two grandsons at this point. And so it was really significant for them to see me cross that point so that they can think about a different future that they may have. And so it's pretty profound. Every single day, all the between the vitamins and the tomato juice and non-negotiable workouts and those things and of eating right, that's all for trying to make sure that I set a different future than what has been presented to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, congrats, man. I know you turned 50, what, a couple months ago, is that right?
Actually, last month. Yeah.
Last month?
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. I know
Yeah.
that's a huge milestone in your family's lineage, and I'm sure your boys and your grandchildren are recognizing that and hopefully celebrating that.
Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean that the knees don't creak and the back doesn't ache. Okay, just to you. But hopefully the blood is flowing well through the heart and
Yeah.
uh, and everything otherwise is functioning well. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, it's fun to see. I think the people that are typically the most successful, and I don't mean necessarily monetarily wise, but the people who are most successful are the ones that are setting out to do good in the world and have the foresight and quite frankly, just they've got the guts to start something, and and so like you're one of those people. You started something because you go, hey, here's some things I'm dealing with, and here's some things I'm seeing in the market, and I believe that me and an incredible team can make a difference. And so my hat's off to you for what you've been building and hopefully continue to build for years and years to come and creating a lot of good impact in the world.
Yeah, founder the founder, that means a lot because we know just how difficult this is. So I've said to you before, this is like pushing a big boulder uphill. And so sometimes people from the outside just think, oh my gosh, look, you guys raise millions of dollars and you got these great strategic investors and you're dealing with pharma companies and everything's great. It's like, "Well, I'm glad it looks like that."
Right. You get to see all the high points in the press releases, you know, all the work behind the scenes. Right. Yeah. Well, Dell, congrats, man. Glad to have you on here. This has been great. It's always fun to catch up and spend some time together and just to appreciate you and I'm proud of all the things that you and Tiffany and the Acclinate team are doing.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And because this is virtual, Matt, later on today I'm going to have some brews to make sure that I commensurate true business and brews and make it happen.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, last time you turned me on to Uncle Nearest, and I've got 5 or 6 bottles of Uncle Nearest downstairs, so I may crack a little Uncle Nearest tonight.
There you go. And at some point you can invite me over to have some as well.
I will certainly do that. I like it.
Okay, Matt.
Awesome.
Appreciate
All
it.
right. Thank you. Enjoyed it. Thank you, everybody. We'll catch you on the next one.